Wow, House of the Holy, Led Zeppelin. Not a Detroit band, but a band with a certain level of Detroit spunk. Is that correct? Is that what you'd say, John?
I think I would say that they had that rebellious, that there was a scary like confidence, this brutal confidence that they had, that and really ballsy, and they just owned that city when they came.
Yeah.
They came to play at the Grandy Ballroom again. We mentioned that before, and no one knew who they were, so they came for 3 nights, and I think it was 69, 68, and no one came the first night. They had no idea who Led Zeppelin was.
Amazing, amazing.
And the next night, by word of mouth, the the ballroom filled up about 3/4, and the last night it was so hot in there. It was like people were just packed in. Like, just by word of mouth, you knew how amazing they were.
Yeah.
It was there was no one like it. Of all the tours I've been on, that was one that was the most rock and roll, and not the cliche stuff that you've read about, like mud sharks and whatnot. It was more that they were just, I don't know, they had this royal bearing. They lived on Valhalla. There were different rules for Led Zeppelin, and they had that manager who was an ex-fighter who was scary, Peter Grant. But the playing, like
Yeah, he was an ex-wrestler, actually.
West, right,
Huge.
and scary too.
And word at the time was you just didn't mess with him.
You just
Well,
didn't mess.
He wasn't going to hold back if you were messing with him in any way. So promoter, he was quite instrumental in um, artists getting treated better. Not
Yeah.
ripped off. I mean, nobody would try to rip off Peter Grant. No promoter would dare.
Although they did get, oh, well, they were robbed when they were, I forgot if it was Chicago or Detroit, but someone made away with the receipts of a couple of shows, and it was like a really big haul. But other than that, personally, you wouldn't even think to mess with him.
No, no, it's crazy. But we're talking. We mentioned the Grandy Ballroom a few times, and that was, I guess, people would call it the Fillmore of Detroit, which
Yeah.
is pretty accurate. It was run by a guy named Russ Gibb, who
Mhm.
was he also just passed away a few years
Yeah.
ago. But he was a real promoter around town, and the Grandy was. I loved going there, but it was. I'll quickly tell you this innocent guy coming from Ottawa to Detroit, and they tell me where the Grandy Ballroom is. And I go, oh, I'll take a taxi. I go out to the Grandy Ballroom, and sure, they drop me off. I couldn't get one to come back because we were right in the middle where the riots had just happened a year before.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one taxi guy just drove up to me and said, "Get in quickly." And he said, "I heard you were there, and I came to pick you up because we've got to get you out of here." I went, "Where were we?" I had no idea that I was just, living rock and roll in there. But um, so you worked there. You worked behind the counter. You must have seen some amazing artists come through there.
I saw almost everyone that, because it's your time period of writing, you know,
Yeah.
at the Detroit Free Press, and I'm not a pro, but and this is really how I got my start. I would see the bands and I would go home and write about them because it was always better the second time around. And things that I remember, like Sly and the Family Stone, were amazing, and Creedence Clearwater, things I wouldn't even think I would like, but I saw Cream, like every time Cream would play there. Rod Stewart with Jeff Beck, Janis Joplin, who just owned the stage, but more so when she wasn't playing, she sat in Russ Gibbs' office with a book and didn't talk to anyone. The
Mhm.
Velvet Underground sat in that same office with sunglasses on at night and didn't talk to anyone, because my job was to bring them drinks, and you know they just kind of nodded their heads, thanks. It
Yeah.
was, to me, it was a window on the world that I wanted to be a part of. But every band conceivably that was on the radio passed through there. I mean, Rod Stewart they were there a lot, and the Who actually did the rehearsals for Tommy there because the manager, Tom Wright, was Peter Townsend's roommate when they went to art school, and they remained close. So they were, again, like one of our house bands. Like every time the Who were there, they would stay for an extended period
The
of time.
Who, the Who, other than one show in London, the Who debuted Tommy at Grandy Ballroom. That was
Yeah, they did. Saw the rehearsals because, because we were the staff and we were cleaning up or setting up, and they would, you know, just do like sound checks of the person.
we're talking about the Grandy Ballroom in Detroit and what it was like. And I went there once. I'll say this really quickly, but it still knocks me out that I got to do this. The Who were in the dressing room warming up, and they had a little pig amp.
Yeah.
And Keith Moon had 2 beer cans, a radiator, and a windowsill. And he was warming up like that. And I'm sitting on a couch, and to my left is Chuck Berry. And
Oh, man.
oh my God, this is amazing. I've never forgotten that moment. I worked with Pete Townsend a fair amount, and
Yeah,
got to know him, and he was great. What an intelligent guy. And
I know.
but they debuted at least in North America. They debuted at the Grandy Ballroom, and
It's like, I don't know if it's one of my most ignoble or proudest moments, but that same weekend, I remember Chuck Berry asking me if he could come home with me and watch television with my parents. I always thought, wow, that would be beyond guess who's coming to dinner, guess in those
yeah.
innocent times. But
Were you tempted? Were you tempted to say, "Yeah, come on home"?
just to piss off my parents, probably.
Yeah.
He was a little too fast and a little too old for me.
Oh yeah, he was definitely
Both.
interesting guy.
It was an interesting guy.
That's true. Well, but it was a church of rock and roll,
Yeah.
there was another venue for fairly large, which what was it called?
The East Town
Yeah, I'm
Ballroom.
gonna say downtown, the East Town,
Yeah.
and that's where uh,
Rod Stewart played a lot.
yeah, and Joe Cocker came in there with the
Oh yeah.
yeah, big tour, and Elton John played his first time in LA. I mean, in Detroit, was at that venue.
This is like one of my embarrassing moments is like I remember my best friend and I loved his records, so we bought long stem roses and went to the lip of the station and gave
Really?
him John. It's like I can't believe I even did that. Years later, I interviewed him and I didn't dare tell him that. It was in the
That first day I spent the afternoon with him just because it was his first
oh
tour, and we just sat around and talked. The thing I remember is that given all the stuff he wore since then, all the flamboyant stuff he wore at
yeah.
at the Easttown Ballroom, he was wearing just maybe jeans and something, and a little lit up Mickey Mouse on his crotch.
I missed that.
He was just starting to figure out, well, I gotta brighten this up somehow, and that was his first step.
That was very subtle.
Yeah, right. But it was great. It was
Who was
great.
your favorite person to work with when you were at Mercury?
Well, I spent a lot of time with Rod. You're going to interview me now.
I feel much better
You
when
can't,
I'm a viewer.
you can't help it, can you?
Not-
Well, anyway, I worked with Rod Stewart a lot because Maggie May broke several months after I got there, and so it was heavy duty for us because he was our only artist at the time. Eventually, I worked a lot with Rush and Bachman Turner Overdrive, and Ohio Players. I went to Europe with Ohio Players. It was great fun being in Mercury Records at that time. But my main thing was Rod Stewart, who I
Yeah.
haven't seen since.
Seriously?
No, seriously, I haven't seen him since. He went to Warner Brothers, and I went to
Yeah.
A&M Records in LA. I haven't seen him since.
Oh yeah. I interviewed him. My two things that I told him, which I love. Number one, I said, the world is divided into people who can tie scars and those who cannot. You are in the latter camp. And I also told him when I was dating that I would never stay at someone's house all night because of Maggie May. Please don't be here in the morning when I wake up. He changed my whole trajectory of how I conducted myself.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
he,
I would like him.
he was in a lot of places the next morning.
Yeah, right. It was okay for him. It was not okay for the woman to be.
Yeah, right.
So not with, but I that is a little bit my interview style, you know, put you on the carpet for those lyrics.
We're gonna wind down now. We're gonna listen to a piece of music going up, and I want it'll be by Leonard Skinner. And did you ever encounter them, do stories or anything?
Yeah, the reason I wanted to include that song is it was one of those moments where life's mysteries really cracked for me. I It was Lester Bang's birthday, and he was supposed to interview Leonard Skinner, and he said, "Jan, for my birthday, will you interview him?" I go, "I don't know anything about him." He goes, "I'll write your questions." And I go, "Okay, I'm just doing this because it's your birthday, because I don't want." It's like that dream where you go into an exam and you don't know, you haven't studied. That's what I felt like. Yet the band were not particularly nice to me. They didn't like that I was a girl, a female, and that I was from the North. And
Yeah.
they were honestly kind of assholey, and excuse my French. And so Ronnie Van Zant, the lead singer, took pity on me and he said, "Come on, why don't you interview me?" And it wasn't like, "Come on." It was just, it was like, damsel in distress. And we talked for a couple of hours, and he wasn't drinking at the time. And he said, right before we were ready to go, and this is December 13th, Lester's birthday, and it was the end of their tour, it was the last stop, and he said, he was 28 years old, and he goes, "I'm never going to see 30." And I said, "Oh, you can't mean that." I go, "You're just tired. It's the last day of the tour. You kind of, worn yourself out, and no, 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 you'll feel better when you get home, back to Florida." Because no, I had Janis Joplin disease. I'm just not going to see 30. And
He didn't, or he barely did.
he didn't. And I, for some reason, no, he didn't. So I put this in my story. I have like a lot of pangs. It's my last story I do for CREEM while I'm on staff. And I go, "Oh, I shouldn't really put this in the story," but something just compelled me to put that in the story. So there it was, like March 1976, and then October 21st, 1977, their plane goes down, and I was in LA. I'd moved to LA by that time, and they stopped a show I was at to say that the Leonard Skinner plane had crashed, that they didn't know who had made it. There were survivors, and my immediate thought was Ronnie didn't make it. And it was like, how could somebody know? And that he gave me, a stranger he just met, that information, and trusted me with it. And there it was. So on every anniversary, I usually get called to write about it, because it was such a surreal moment. And I don't know. I actually went to this metaphysical church once, and they everybody could ask a question, and they picked mine, and I said, "Well, there's this gentleman who comes to me in dreams and asks me to finish his story, and what's that about?" And the deacon said, "You haven't finished telling Ronnie Van Zant's story." So that haunts me. If there's any story that haunts me, it was the Leonard Skinner story.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll take a listen on the way out. But I want to thank you very, very much. It's so great to sit and talk with you and see you again, and after a long time, and it was good fun. I want to thank our producer, Jeremiah Higgins, who's puts these things together. You can listen to the Mike Gormley Show on social media all over the place, Spotify and Apple Plus and all those places. But we're also on the radio in Los Angeles and New York and Boston and Philadelphia, as well as in London, England, and Somerset, England. So it's I hope everybody out there enjoys this great talk we just had with Jaan Uhelszki, who's still working at CREEM magazine after all these years.
Thank you. Still haven't gotten your job yet, but
No, well, you probably wouldn't have liked it, but you wouldn't have had the freedom yet.
thank you so much. You really are a legend to me.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming
Okay.
by.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Bye
Bye.
bye.